Good morning. I'm going to be reading this morning about Jesus rising from the dead in both the Beginner's Bible, in a chapter called Jesus is Risen, and also from the Jesus Storybook Bible, from a chapter called God's Wonderful Surprise. After Jesus died, some of his friends laid his body in a big tomb. They sealed it shut with a large round stone. Some soldiers guarded the tomb. 3 days later, the earth shook. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven and pushed the stone away from the tomb. Then the angel sat on the stone. When the soldiers saw the angel, they fell to the ground. Mary was walking to the tomb with some of her friends. They saw the angel who said, "Do not be afraid. Jesus is not here. He is risen. Go and tell Peter and the other disciples that Jesus is alive." On their way, the women saw Jesus. They fell to their knees and worshipped him. Jesus smiled and said, "Go and tell the others that I will see them in Galilee." So Mary ran to tell the disciples. And it seemed to her that morning, as she ran, almost as if the whole world had been made anew. Almost as if the whole world was singing for joy. The trees, tiny sounds in the grass, the birds, her heart. Was God really making everything sad come untrue? Was he making even death come untrue? She couldn't wait to tell Jesus' friends. "They won't believe it," she laughed. Of course, she was right.
The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1 verse 5. Happy Easter, and welcome to our Easter Sunday Willie Church online broadcast. I'm so glad you're joining us from wherever you are. If you're connecting with us for the first time on this broadcast, we'd love you to connect with us at williechurch.org.au/connect, where you can let us know a little bit about yourself, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, so that we can connect with you after this broadcast and this morning. We would love you to interact with us during this Willie Church Online. You'll see on your Church Online screen that you can post a comment here in the chat. Myself and Jono and Tiffany from our ministry team will be here responding to your comments, and you can also submit a private prayer request in the Church Online platform. For those of you who are part of our Williamstown Church of Christ family already, you're invited to join in our Sunday prayer live this morning at 10:30 via Zoom. Members of our church community will be able to find the link to that in our own church Facebook group. If you're not already a part of our Williamstown Church family, but would love us to pray for you in this time, please comment here in the broadcast or send us a DM on Facebook or Instagram so that we can pray for you for whatever is happening for you in this time. As well as today's Easter Sunday broadcast of Willie Church Online, we're keeping you informed as a church via our e-news, our online connect groups, our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and also our Facebook groups. Church, stay in touch in this time. Keep an eye out on all of our channels for updates of how we are being the church together in this season. Today is Easter Sunday. It's the climax of the Christian calendar. And yet we find ourselves living in very strange times, unparalleled times. For all of us, our lives today are nothing like we have known them before. Our Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said that 2020 will be the toughest year of our lives. Many of us are already experiencing the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic here locally in our inner west pocket of Melbourne, whilst the impact and the unravelling of the outbreak around Australia and around the globe continues to become evident. Our rhythms and routines have been upended. Many people have lost jobs and businesses have closed. Many people are unwell or fear becoming ill with the virus. Our medical system and hospitals, doctors and nurses are under unprecedented and continuous pressure. There is a sense of social isolation for many. There is genuine concern for our mental health and well-being in this time. There is a lot of fear and anxiety. And all of us are needing to adapt to living under an entirely unfamiliar set of societal restrictions, so foreign to us as those who live in one of the world's most affluent and free cities. With all of this in mind, maybe it is hard to rejoice today, to enter into the joy and celebration of Easter Sunday. Maybe your heart aches. Maybe your spirit is heavy. I can relate because I know within myself there's been a grief, a kind of sorrow that has been with me these past weeks as we've watched our world stand still, as cities have been locked down, borders closed, and with upwards of 90,000 people having already died from this pandemic. The situation can seem hopeless and overwhelming. Even with the encouraging news of this week that the curve in Australia is definitely flattening, we can still feel completely overcome with the current situation of events. But that is not where we need to stay, because the Easter story speaks life and hope to all of us. It's relevant, it's life-changing, and I know that as we listen again to the Easter story and enter into the narrative, God has something profound to say to us. He has something profound to speak to us in this unique cultural moment as we seek to live well as the people of God in these uncertain times. And if you're not already a believer, then I know that God will speak something through these moments. As you hear the Easter story, He will speak something to your spirit around the hope that we have and are invited to have. You see, the Easter story, it invites us to live in a new way, not crippled with fear or despair, not looking inwards at the things we're missing out on, not isolated, not disconnected, not riddled with anxiety about the future. Part of the bedtime routine we have with our 1-year-old daughter is that we read her a storybook each night before we say goodnight and put her in her cot, give her a kiss and a cuddle and so on. The story we read her is the same story each night. It's a well-known Australian children's book. But the whole idea behind our sharing the story with her is that it is to be a time of connection. It's a time between our daughter and myself, or our daughter and my husband, whoever is settling her to sleep that night. And it's the same with the Easter story. The story is all about connection between our Creator God and us as His people. And it's a story that changes us. It's a story that's changed my life from when I heard it as a younger girl and responded to it at that time. And it's allowed me in my own life to live with a deep freedom and a deep knowing that I am good enough because of God's love for me. This morning, as we hear the Easter story again from Matthew's Gospel, I want to suggest that the Easter story is a story that invites us to live, firstly, with courage, secondly, with hope, and lastly, with purpose in these times. Courage, hope, and purpose. We're going to hear the Easter story now from the New Testament, which is a section of the Bible all about Jesus. Jesus had taught for 3 years. He'd died on a Friday, and his body had been put in a tomb. The disciples, like everyone else, and maybe like you, thought people stayed dead. But early on the Sunday morning, we meet some of the women who followed Jesus on their way to the tomb to pay their respects. And that's when they discovered something they never expected.
After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me."
The title of my message today is Finding Courage, Hope and Purpose in a Time of Crisis. The first thing that we see as we listen to Matthew's account of the resurrection is that the Easter story invites us to live with courage. Even in their grief and fear, Jesus' female followers remain courageous and faithful. When it seems like all is lost, Matthew's Gospel tells us that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. The last thing they were expecting was that an angel would appear to tell them that Jesus had risen from the dead. And yet, they show up, they act with courage, and they go to see the tomb where their friend had been laid. The Easter story invites us to live with courage. C.S. Lewis's words, written 72 years ago, are unexpectedly relevant to us today. He writes about the possibility of humanity being destroyed by an atomic bomb. We could simply substitute that for COVID-19. He writes, and I quote, "If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children. Not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds." Unquote. Like Mary Magdalene and Mary, we are called to be a people of courage. We are called to not huddle together like frightened sheep, but we are called to be people of courage and not fear. We are called to show up, to be faithful to our God, even in our grief. Secondly, the Easter story invites us to live with hope in these times. The Easter story is the ultimate display of God's defeat of death and evil and sin. On Good Friday, it seems like death has won, but then comes Sunday. The empty tomb. God is doing something completely new. Jesus appears to the two Marys and says to them, "Do not be afraid." Tom Wright puts it like this: "The God who remained apparently silent on Good Friday is having the last word." The Easter story invites us to live with hope in every circumstance. God's promise to us is that nothing can separate us from his love. Neither death nor life, nor angels nor demons, nor principalities nor powers, nor things present nor things to come, nor height nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation can separate us from the love of God found in Jesus Christ. So today, be filled with hope. God has defeated sin and death and brokenness, and we know that He is at work in our world by His immeasurable power. He has not left us alone in these days. He grieves with us and with our world in our sorrow. He helps us in our time of need. He offers hope to every single one of us. I love the Charlie McAfee cartoon where the boy says to the horse, "Those are dark clouds." And the horse replies, "Yes, but they will move on. The blue sky above never leaves." The blue sky is the hope we have because of Jesus. So the Easter story invites us to live with courage. And the Easter story invites us to live with hope in these times. Thirdly, the Easter story invites us to live with purpose in these times. The Gospel writer Matthew, in his biography of Jesus, records that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary hurried to share the amazing news. One of the reasons I absolutely relish and always really look forward to preaching on Easter Sunday, and today is no different, is that I feel such a connection with the Marys who were the very first to proclaim the resurrection. This story is a story to be shared because it's a story that changes everything. It's a story that tells us who we are and what we were made for. It's a story that gives shape and form and structure to our lives. I was reading recently that coronavirus gets its name from a spiked ring of proteins on its surface that resembles a crown, hence the title of corona. In many ways, the coronavirus is revealing the crowned heads that we already worship: health, self, protection, medicine, certainty. Of course, we know that Jesus wore a different crown. A crown of sacrifice, a crown of selflessness, a crown of love. It's easy at any time, and perhaps especially in this time of crisis, for our world, at our own sphere, to become so very small. We can become inward looking, focusing only on what we need and on our limits and our challenges. But the incredible thing about Easter is that it invites us into a bigger story. It frees us from self to focus on God and others. It frees us from fear and gives us a deep peace. It frees us from grief and gives us a profound comfort. It frees us from striving and gives us the rest we need. It frees us from shame because our shame and sin are dealt with on the cross of Christ, and we can receive forgiveness and a fresh start. It frees us from isolation because we join the community, the family of God, the church, and we know we will never be alone. And it frees us from just surviving our lives and invites us to thrive. Wouldn't it be amazing if we thrived in this unique season? And invites us to live life to the full as we follow Jesus. The Christian story is one that invites us into a bigger story than ourselves. The Easter story gives us purpose so that even in these uncertain times, even in a time of COVID-19, even in a time where we don't know what the next weeks and months will look like, we know our purpose, and that is to follow Jesus, to be a blessing to our community, to be good news to the inner west of Melbourne, to do all we can to love and protect our neighbours and our wider community. If we are stuck at home or feeling like we're limited to our homes because of self-isolation, the Easter story fills us with gratitude for all that we do have. If we are having to pivot quickly to working from home and finding it challenging to strike a balance between work and rest, we can come to Jesus and He will give us rest. If we have young children at home and we find this time intense, it's an overwhelming time, a depleting time with young little ones at home, we can place our trust in the one who is working all things together for our good. And we can hear his promise to us that he is with us in all of it. In the busyness, in the uncertainty, in the messiness, in the challenge, he is with us. Just as he appeared to Mary and he said, "Do not be afraid." This Easter, why don't you hear Jesus speak those words over your life? Do not be afraid. One of the things that I found has helped me so much these past 3 or 4 weeks, since we've all been staying at home so much of the time, has been jogging. I can be feeling completely exhausted from parenting our young daughters. I can feel overwhelmed by the weight of the 24/7 news cycle and the ever-changing landscape of COVID-19. I can feel exhausted from the change and the transition that we've had to go through as a church, pivoting quickly to online. I can feel tired of preparing and cleaning up after snack time and lunchtime, sweeping the floor, tidying up after young children, only to have to tidy the same area a few hours later. But when I get out for a run, my feet find their stride, my body moves, and I can release stress. I feel realigned in mind, in body, in spirit, and I am refreshed. This Easter, I invite you to let the Easter story realign you once more. May the Easter story fill you with courage today, the courage of Mary and who go to the tomb to pay their respects, even in their deep grief as they have lost their close friend. Let the Easter story fill you with hope, the hope that knows that we have a loving God who has defeated death in his son Jesus, and who loves the world so much that we know he will return one day to make every wrong right, and that on that day there's going to be no more grief, disease, pain, tears. And may the Easter story fill you with purpose. May this story transform you and change everything about how you see yourself and about how you see God and about how you see others and the world around you. May the Easter story today truly change you. Amen. I'd like to bless you on your way as you go about the rest of your day with a blessing, a benediction written by Clement of Rome, who was a pope back in the 14th century. And he was in church leadership during the first wave of the Black Death, which was a devastating plague. And he would walk the streets of Rome and pray this benediction over the church. And I pray it over you today. We ask you, Master, be our helper and defender. Rescue those of our number in distress. Raise up the fallen. Assist the needy. Heal the sick. Turn back those of your people who stray. Feed the hungry. Release our captives. Revive the weak. Encourage those who lose heart. Let all the nations realize that you are the only God, that Jesus Christ is your Son, and that we are your people and the sheep of your pasture. Go in the peace of God. Amen.
In Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are still, when striving cease. My comforter, my all and all, here in the love of Christ I stand. who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe. This gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save. Till on that cross, as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live. In the ground his body lay, light of the world by darkness slain. Then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. And as he stands at victory, sin's curse has lost its grip on me. For I am his, and he is mine, bought with the precious blood of Christ. No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. And no power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand. Till he returns or calls me home, here in the power of Christ I'll stand. And no power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand. Till he returns or calls me home, here in the power of Christ I'll stand.